You give the computer inputs, a function, and outputs, and then you provided a training function. That training function alters the function so that the inputs map to the outputs. For a human being, those inputs would be our experiences, and the output would be the meaning that we're adding to those experiences.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, the podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. My guest today is Aditya Nagrath with elephantlearning.com. We're going to talk about math anxiety, effectively. So this is targeted to parents, to teachers, mostly to kids K through 8. But I suspect those of you who have kids with math anxiety and older kids may have something to glean from it as well. Aditya, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you came to be doing this work.
Yeah, so I was meeting with a professor of mine for a National Science Foundation grant back in 2016. And the idea was, back then, could you take National Science Foundation research and somehow turn that into a company? And what they had was some amount of games that they had built for preschoolers. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to apply for this grant to create a company to do first, second, third grade mathematics. And this was kind of a challenging project because when you look at it, it's like, well, there's a lot of math games out there. Like, what's very special about what we're doing here? What's the differentiator? And first, he had to convince me that this was a project kind of worth taking on. So what he told me was that 4 out of 5 students start kindergarten unprepared for the kindergarten curriculum. And what that boils down to, because I had to ask him, was that they don't understand the teacher when it comes to the quantities. And that's because the gap is that parents would think that counting to 10 is just saying the numbers aloud. Like if I say 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10, that sounds like counting to 10. But to kindergarten, it's, can you give me 10 things? And the student's able to slide over 10 things and stop on 10. And so we took a look at the games they had, and I asked him, well, how effective are these games? And he says, on average, children are learning about a year of math over the course of 10 weeks. And they were using it, I think, 10 minutes a day in a classroom, so 50 minutes a week. And so we took on that project, and that's how I kind of got into mathematics education. I mean, beyond having a Ph.D. in mathematics and being a GTA for so many years, and graduate teaching assistant. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And from there, we kind of knew when we started that, math anxiety is a thing that's affecting, at least half of all Americans. And so we knew that we'd have to tackle this issue. And I think after several years, after speaking with parents through customer success, we were able to start to, kind of identify what is the challenge and how do we overcome.
So it started off focusing on engaging kids in using games to learn math, and then it has kind of expanded to, well, there's this underlying core issue underneath the math, which is the anxiety around math. And if we can't deal with the anxiety, it's kind of hard to deal with the math. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So the initial focus was, could we get a student to gain enough language to understand the teacher at the classroom level? And so he came in with games that were working with preschoolers and kindergartners to teach them to count to 10. But then the goal was like, okay, could we keep that student going? But also, could we take a third grader who maybe is performing 2 to 3 years behind, which is what the statistics show, that like on average, an unfunded peer versus a funded peer is about 3 years behind conceptually. So their understanding of numbers rivals the kindergarten first grader, but they're learning to multiply. So can we get their level of language up to multiplication so that they could then participate in the classroom? And so like that's what we've successfully done there. But yeah, from there, what we wanted to do was we wanted to be able to work with the students on the anxiety level.
I'm going to pause the anxiety level for a minute, and I want to go back because I think I just understood something that's really interesting. So I heard you talking about underserved or under-resourced peers. So part of what we're talking about is gapping the disparity, is breaking the disparity gap, is helping kids who may not have the same resources get the access so that we can elevate their readiness to learn.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the other thing I've heard you saying, which is really interesting, and I've never really thought about it this way, is that there's a language piece to it. It's not just about understanding math. It's about feeling comfortable with the language of math so that you can learn to use the processes and procedures. That if it feels like a foreign language to a kid, it's going to be a lot harder for them to learn that language. And we may not often think about math as a language. We think about it as a skill. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that's really interesting.
Yeah. So like that's kind of the main thing underlying everything is that like um, mathematics itself is something that people think you have to do. You have to perform it. It's the calculations. And that's, I think, because of the way that like it's approached in teaching maybe right now. And it didn't always used to necessarily be this way, though it's hard to kind of imagine a world 100 some years ago because like the education levels were much lower than they are now.
Right.
And if you approach it as a language and you think about it as understanding, the standards are defining the understanding, say, of multiplication as you're able to see a problem in the real world or in a word problem, and you're able to identify, well, I multiply these numbers and that's the solution, or some version more complicated than that potentially. And that's sort of the deal is that like if you don't have that understanding, but if you keep progressing, so like maybe you're able to do the calculations and keep going, for example, then you could get to algebra and you see 7 times x, and you have to be thinking, what does this even mean? And that is actually the basis of the anxiety, because human beings have anxiety whenever there's a gap in understanding. If you started using a whole bunch of language that I didn't understand, and I just continued to pretend that I understood it, there's going to be that anxiety of, am I using that language correctly? And so now when that builds up, like, children give up.
Yeah, for sure. And as I'm listening to you, fascinating because I'm thinking about all the different ways in which this applies to complex kids. We talk about irritation as in the gap between expectation and reality. And what you're saying is that anxiety is when there's a gap in understanding. And when we have a gap, it stresses us out, right? And here, as I was listening to you, I was trying to apply it to language. So I am an adult with learning disabilities, and learning a foreign language was really hard for me. And what I realized is I learned a lot of vocabulary in Spanish, but I never learned the grammar, the syntax, the structure, any of that. So I can't speak it. I can just pull out words. And I can imagine that might be equivalent to a kid who's asked to do multiplication or division, or they've got some techniques or some piece of it, but they don't have it in a framework that makes it make sense to them. Is that accurate?
Well, so the problem is this, is that like we're talking about like some ideas that are fundamental. And the real challenge is that like without one-on-one conversation with the student, it's challenging to determine if they've understood it, because we're so ready to give them the check mark when the ball goes in the hoop, right? So it's like, if I say to a child, what's 3 + 4? And they tell me 7, right? You know what? They're good. They're going to be fine. Yeah.
Right.
Right. But if you start speaking to them and you say something like, hey, could you give me 3 things? Give me 4 more things. How many things do I have now? Maybe they're struggling with this idea, but there's this possibility to memorize, but not necessarily understand. And this is something that happens mainly during conversation when you can start to figure that out. And so because school is designed for 30 on 1, can't this becomes very challenging for the teacher. And it becomes challenging for assessment. It becomes challenging for a lot of reasons. And I think that's why that you can have students that progress, even though maybe they don't have the understanding that they need. And now when you get to a level where the language is that much higher than the understanding, yeah, that student is not going to feel like they can understand. But that's, again, it's not like wherever there's a gap in understanding, there's probably anxiety. It's not all anxiety is a gap in understanding, but the other way around is definitely there because
Right.
we've all had this experience of going to, say, like an industry conference that's not our industry, right? Like the first time we go to a conference for a new job, and they're using all those KPI, or sorry, not KPIs. They're using all the acronyms. I used an acronym. They're using all these acronyms that we don't understand, and like at that point, yeah, we feel lost, and like there's some anxiety, and like, am I going to be able to pick them all up? Look at how many they're using.
So let's take a quick break and then let's come back and dive into anxiety a little bit more. Can we do that?
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called Cognitive Ergonomics from the Inside Out. To learn more, visit cognitive-ergonomics.com.
Welcome back, everybody. My guest is Aditya, I'm going to get the last name wrong, Nagrath, right?
Yeah, that's right. Dr. Nagrath.
Dr. Nagrath. How about that? Dr. Nagrath, I can do really easily. And we're talking about math and the concept of math as learning a language rather than learning your 1, 2, 3s, right? Really understanding the foundations of the language of mathematics and the concepts so that we can help kids move forward. And that moves into this conversation about anxiety in math, because when there's a gap in understanding, it can, for lack of a better word, stress you out, right? It can create anxiety for kids, for teachers, for parents, for all of us. And I'm thinking the equivalent when I first started in this world, and my kids were being diagnosed with all these different complex issues, and all these professionals were talking about the term executive function, and I didn't know what they meant. I knew I was supposed to know what they meant, and I knew the words, but I didn't know how to apply it or the context of their foundation. And it took me a while to figure it out. And so I hear this equivalent in the math space that if there's this sense of not knowing, but embarrassed to not let you know I don't really understand it, that's going to create some stress, right?
Yeah, that's definitely going to cause anxiety.
Yeah. So you started off dealing with the sort of the math piece, and now there's this book around anxiety and math. What's the premise here? What are you trying to address here?
So what we looked at is philosophically, if you look at what a human being is doing, is we're having these experiences, and then what we do is we add meaning to those experiences. And it's not just me that says that, but like lots of people say this. But philosophically, it's true, because like if you look at what an AI model is, it's like inputs and it's outputs, and there's some modeling off of a human being to create this thing.
We don't know what an AM model is, right?
Yeah. So like, let me show you the picture, because like I do this, but so like if you look at what they modeled AI after, it was learning, and so very high level AI looks like this. So like you give the computer inputs, a function, and outputs, and then you provided a training function, and what it does is that training function alters the function so that the inputs map to the outputs. And what you're hoping is that the continuity of that function maintains, like the similarities. So like, for example, you give it an image of a whole bunch of ovens and a whole bunch of microwaves and right? And then you walk through your kitchen, you point your camera at things, and it says, that's an oven, that's a microwave, right? So you can train that on your iPhone if you want. There's a way to do that with Xcode if you go look it up. But for a human being, those inputs would be our experiences, and the output would be the meaning that we're adding to those experiences. And then we're responding to that, right? Whatever that meaning we decide is, like it kind of runs through and then we're like, and maybe it's reaction, like maybe it's trauma. And it's like, oh, wow, we're reacting now to this.
Right.
And so like for mathematics, for basketball, for piano, for reading, whatever it is, that meaning boils down to either I can do this or I can't do this. And everything that the student seems to be creating after that looks like evidence to support I can do this or I can't do this. So it might sound like I'm not a math person, I'm stupid, I'm right, whatever. And it's typically identity based because you can't argue with that. You know what I mean? Like, no, you are a math person.
Right.
And so, like, what we say in the book is that there's two things you have to do to combat this. Is one, you have to believe that the student can do it and tell them, "I believe you can do this." And two, you have to meet them at their level of understanding. So if you can come down then and then find their level of understanding and say, "Okay, we're gonna work with you here," then you see success. And so, like, as I've kind of gone around with this book, that's what everyone tells me about as the teacher that finally believed they could do it, stopped and went back to their level of understanding and worked with them to get them to get there.
So many things come up, and I am loving what you're saying because this totally reinforces the coaching model that we teach. And the message is if they believe they can or they believe they can't, they'll be right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing you saying, so we have to hold the belief for them even when they have a hard time believing it for themselves.
We have to keep them on the I can side of it. And that can only happen if you also believe it, because if you don't believe it, you're going to communicate that even if you don't intend to.
Exactly. And there's, by the way, folks, I'll put it in the show notes. There's a great podcast with Andreas Kraft, who's a futurist who did all this research on hope. And this is the exact summary that they came to, was how important it is to believe and to believe in them and to help them begin to believe in themselves. But we have to actually, to your point, really actually believe it. And if we as parents are skeptical or concerned or afraid or worried ourselves, our kids are going to like smell it. They're going to feel it.
Yeah. And telling them, I believe you can do it, because when you tell them that, you're making a commitment to them that you're going to stay with them until they do it. And if they stay with you, I mean, I typically say outside of the parenting situation, but like now I tell this to my kids so often that they don't really question it. But like, theoretically speaking, if they stay with you, then they're also making a commitment back to you. So like if you're a coach or a teacher and they're staying with you, now they also believe they can do it.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And what I want to point out is that you can extrapolate this to absolutely any executive function issue or learning issue your kids are struggling with. This is not just about mathematics. What you're identifying is actually how the psyche and the human brain works together to allow for safety and learning.
Yeah, exactly. So we went and researched the techniques that help people be powerful. And then we said we could powerfully apply it to mathematics.
I love that. Beautiful. Beautiful. So let me tell people how they can find out more about you in the book, and then we'll come out and see what else we haven't touched on that you want to use in this conversation. So the company that Dr. Nagrath is talking about is elephantlearning.com. And they have a new book called Treating Mathematics Anxiety. And we'll have a link to both of those in the show notes. And the book will also be linked on our reading carousel on the site for those of you who are on the website. And so elephantlearning.com. As we begin to wrap this conversation, what have we not talked about that's important? We talked about believing the student can do it, truly believing. We've talked about meeting them at their level of understanding. We've talked about really creating a consciousness to the language of mathematics and being aware that anxiety, where the anxiety is coming from in a gap of understanding. What have we missed? Or is there something there you want to highlight?
Well, there is one last thing that I tell people that I like to leave them with, which is you can't give up, because when it comes to like basketball or piano, like I could find a different sport or I could find a different instrument or something. There's going to be something out there that the kid's interested in, like Minecraft. They'll get interested. It's an extracurricular activity. But when it comes to mathematics and reading, that's sort of it. Like if you're not doing those things, it's really hard to do anything else. And so like we really got to keep trying with that, and we really got to believe they can do it and keep going at it.
So what's your response to kids who say, I don't care about math. I'm not going to use math when I'm an adult. The kids who are into language arts or reading, I don't need math. What's your response to that?
I mean, the real challenge is that like they're kind of communicating to you that like I'm never going to use it. And it's really challenging to convince someone of that like, hey, look, here's this set of mental tools that you can use to solve problems that I use on a daily basis so often that I can't even think about to tell you when I've used it because I so subconsciously used it that no recognition that it happened. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
it's like how do you convince a student of that? And so this is sort of the question of the year. But like the thing is that these topics they are useful every single day. And I'm not 100% sure that like the topics that we've chosen to teach the students are actually the useful topics, to be honest with you, because I use game theory daily. I use probability theory daily. I mean, I still multiply daily, right? But like in goal of potentially a game theory thing, right? Or in goal of a probability theory. Or so like I really don't know what to say. Like set theory. Guess what? I use that whenever I go on Facebook for digital marketing. I mean, this thing is everywhere, and we try to silo it for students, and we try to say no, it's separate, but it's integrated. It's like I don't know. This is part of the anxiety of it.
What I love about what you're saying is that we can't convince them that it's important, but we can model for them and we can show them and we can invite them to see and share with them all the ways that we're actually using mathematics in our lives that we're not even aware of it. And
If we start doing the math out loud, that would help. But like we were taught not
out
to.
loud. I love that. That's beautiful. Beautiful way to end as a final quote is do the math out loud, right? Empower their sense of mathematics. I heard you saying earlier when we were starting.
Empowering children with mathematics. That's our mission at Elephant Learning. So that's what we do.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Dr. Nagrath, thank you. Thank you for what you do. And I think it's really, really important. And thank you for sharing this wisdom. It's been really interesting and insightful for me, and I'm sure for everybody listening.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. To those of you listening, check in with yourself. What are you aware of now that you weren't aware of half an hour or so ago? What's your insight or your aha from this conversation? What are you thinking about? What kid has your attention? What do you want to do with the information you've learned from today? How do you want to apply it in your life, whether you're here as a parent or as a teacher or as a therapist? How do you want to apply this insight to the kids that you are trying to support? And as always, my friends, thank you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, your engagement, your role makes such a huge difference. Thanks for being here. Tune in next time. Next episode is going to be Diane and me riffing on some important topic in the community. And until then, take care of yourselves, take care of your kids, and then take care of yourselves again. And we'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.